from the Microsoft Office product team, and I'm a program manager, which means I do more of the talking and look at the bigger picture. And Kevin, do you want to talk about what you were doing?
Yeah, I was actually a test engineer. So my job was to kind of fix all of Gary's problems.
Yeah, and what I like to think is that the test people know everything about the product. Think of the person who tests the car that's manufactured. They know everything about the car. The developers are the ones who work on the brakes, and they work on the gas tank, and they work on the pieces, and they don't always have a good picture of the overall things. So between us, though, we have tons and tons of experience, and we wanted to share this experience because, let's face it, our spouses don't want to hear about what we work on. So you guys are providing a nice outlet for us. And due to reorging at Microsoft, we were both recently no longer working there, and so we're frustrated presenters, and so hopefully you guys can help us out here. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So what this is about is relational databases on the web. And so you people who know what a relational database is, you might remember over history that, for example, the company of Oracle exists because of relational databases. I mean, IBM has DB2, there's Sybase, there's SQL Server from Microsoft. These are typically big, expensive systems, and the reason they could be successful is because they solved a very big problem. So relational databases is a way of storing your data in a way that can be reported on. It's very flexible. It can be updated. The design can be changed. It's a very powerful tool, and typically it's been out of the hands of mere mortals. You had to be a DBA or someone highly skilled. So, but to take that relational database and move it to the cloud and essentially make it a web app is really a powerful thing. It solves lots of problems for organizations. So in this case, in the web, you have a browser client. So no longer do I have to go install some kind of rich client on your desktop so you can access this data. Also, it's worldwide access, right? On anything on a browser, I can be on an airplane and connect into my data and work with that. Now, because it's running as a server someplace, then you're getting to it, it's controlled in one place. It's not a file or a thumb drive that people are walking around with. So it's secure. You know, IT is managing that. So somebody in some data center somewhere on the planet has ultimate control over that, access and data, and who can get to it, and is it, again, backed up. If I make an update it in one place, and everyone can get those updates. And it's scalable because, again, it's running on a server that can be scaled up as opposed to some little rich client device that you're running on. And it's SQL-based. Relational databases are SQL, which is the standard. So lots and lots and lots of tools are available and knowledge on how to interact with data that's running in SQL, using SQL. So enough of me rambling. We'll let Kevin go ahead here and show you a quick demo of a relational database. So, you want to grab control?
Thanks, Gary. Let me go ahead and take control of the screen here. And hopefully everybody is seeing a web browser. Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Great. So as you can see, this is a browser, and what I've done is I've actually taken the old Northwind sample database that has been included in various different products, and I've loaded it in here. Again, we're in a browser, as you can see. I get the benefits of being in a browser, so I can zoom in, zoom out, etc. All that's kind of baked in. Now we've got a very kind of consistent design element here. So if you notice over on the left-hand side here, we have a list of tables. Each of these tables basically represents information in our database. As I click through here, you can see the information in the pane changes here, and I get a different set of views going across the top. And we'll actually look at those in a little detail. But again, you can see if I click on shippers, and now you see the application only has 3 shipping companies. Now the different views we have, probably the one you would see 99% of the time is what we call the list detail, and that's what this is here. So I've gone in and I've actually selected the products, and it's showing me the list detail here. As I select values here, you should see them updating over on the detail side. Right? So as I click through, it always stays in sync. We also get some other kind of baked-in goodness, where if I were to go click on the categories link, for example,
let's blame those guys at Microsoft.
Excellent. Well, what normally would have happened here is a pop-up. Let me just refresh the browser, and we'll give it a. I just loaded this, so I'm guessing. Excellent. Okay.
There you go.
Maybe we're back now. Yeah, okay. So a little bit of side there. So we can see as I clicked on the categories, what happened here is it automatically drilled me in to showing the meat and poultry category. And then what I get down here is what we call the related items control. And this is showing me all the other products that are listed in that same category. And again, I can just simply click here, and I can drill in again, and I can keep going in. I could actually go to the supplier, and you can see I can kind of cascade my way down as far as I want to go. Another built-in feature we have in the list detail is the ability to filter. So for example, if I go here and type meat and hit return, I'm going to go ahead and filter everything that has meat in the title. So for example, the Boston crab meat. But I also get things that are in that same meat and poultry catalog or category. And what's happening here is we're basically searching down through that table, but we're also searching through all the related items. So as you know, a related database, meat and poultry might be number 6, but it's smart enough to actually go in and say, well, what does 6 really mean? Well, 6 really means meat and poultry. So that's a built-in kind of feature you get. Now, data entry is fairly simple. Let's say I want to go ahead and create a new order. I can click here. I go to what we call the action bar, and I click the plus sign. We've also got the ability to delete a record, edit a record, save a record when it's in a mode you'll see in a second, or I can cancel. So let's go here. I'll hit Add New, and as I start typing, it's going to go ahead and complete the values for me. So you can see everything here that has a B and an E is selected. So I can go here and I can set the Split Rail Beer and Ale Company. It fills it in there. I'm going to go ahead and add myself, if I spell my name right. And what you'll notice here is I'm not in that list. A couple other Kevins are, but not me. So I can quickly go ahead and add that by going here, typing that, hitting save. I'll then go ahead and close that, and now it automatically filled in my name. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that in for my order. I can now go here and I can add some detail. Should fill in the order ID. That's interesting. That's not going to work.
Still finding.
Yeah, it should find the order ID. Anyways, I can go hit the Sasquatch Ale, $10. I can give a 5% discount. And I think that's probably not going to work. Something. Normally it should get filled in automatically. I'm not sure what's going on there. But in any event, I should see the order detail. No. Cancel. Showing up here. And if I go look at an existing record, you can see it shows me the subtotals down there. So that's the list detail, and that's probably the view that is the most common. We have a couple other ones. I'm going to go up to the product view here, and I'll show you the data sheet. And this is basically kind of your Excel-looking grid, but it has some built-in functionality. So, for example, let's say I wanted to get rid of all the items that are no longer being viewed. I can get rid of the discontinued. I can also filter on categories. So let's say I just want to look at the beverages, and you can see it'll filter on the beverages, and maybe I want to go ahead and look at the dairy products as well. So I can do that, and I can also sort on that. So that's a great way to kind of look at a lot of data real quickly.
You can also like cut and paste columns and things like that. So it's a good way of bulk working with your data instead of one record at a time.
And the third view we'll look at real quickly is actually the summary view. And I've actually created a summary view off of the customers. So this here actually shows me where all my customers are. And if you can see out to the right-hand side here, it actually shows me the number in there. So I've got 9 customers in Brazil, 11 in Germany, and 7 in the UK. And on this side here, I get the same kind of drill through that I get in the related items control, where all I have to do is click on it, and it brings me into that. So that's a kind of a real quick whirlwind. Now, the important thing to note here is it's required absolutely no coding. This is all just baked into the product. I had to do nothing out of the ordinary. With that, I'll hand it back to Gary.
All right, and I'll grab the presenter mode. And so you're seeing the slides there, Kevin? So can you folks see the slides now? Are we good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Good. I think Kevin might have muted himself. So what you saw then was a web browser containing with a data container, a relational database that was centrally managed and stored. And I wanted to point out that these databases on the web have a standard interface, meaning that the default way you look at them is the same. Just like an Excel spreadsheet. If I send you an Excel spreadsheet, can you figure it out? Yes, because I know I have navigation, I know where my rows and my columns are, I can look around the menus, and I know how to use it, so I don't have to learn every single spreadsheet. So the standard elements we have for this interface is that on the left is your tables. Tables and queries can be shown there, so as you select those data elements you want, the rest of the page responds. Along the top is once I select one of those data elements, I have different ways of viewing it. So if I pick customers, then I have different views. I want to see their phone numbers, I want to see their addresses, I want to see their what they recently purchased, that kind of stuff. I can see different views of the data. And then once I have the data, I have a column of data I can, as Kevin showed you, I can filter and search through that data and scroll around and see all those design elements. And as I select each one of those, I see the details of that off to the right. So that's our standard UI for these web relational databases. So why are we talking about these? And the answer is, well, this is something that you get for absolutely free with Office 365. So if you have Office 365 subscriptions, then this is something you have at no extra cost. And if you're spending that money for that subscription, you might as well take advantage of it. Now you have to have the subscription level that has SharePoint in it, but that's pretty much the only requirement. So this now gives you a very simple place to put your relational data. You no longer have to have a 3-year project, using Oracle or ASP.NET or whatever to create this data. So what is this thing in Office 365 that you probably have never found and that was there and you guys have been using it for a while or you've heard a lot about? Well, it's actually called Access Web Apps. And we've purposely not mentioned the word Access because a lot of people have a preconception. Access, that's that desktop database thing I used back in the 90s. And so then they kind of turn off. So we wanted to show you some of the value before we talked about it. So if you have Office 365 and you look in your services part of your admin, you'll see this thing called Access Services. You can turn it off, so that you don't want any people do that, or you can turn it on. But it's a SharePoint app. So if you know SharePoint apps, then you know what you built. This relational database is a SharePoint app, and we inherit all the attributes of a standard SharePoint app. And the way you create this, though, is you do need to use the Access desktop client. Which if you have Office 365, you have access to it free. So Access, the classic desktop client, the newest version, of course, 2013, is what you go in and you actually build, you define and you edit your relational databases on the web. So Access Web Apps are edited and created there. Now, once you've created a really cool app, and put some cool data in, maybe towards some business goal thing, you can actually package it up and give it away, or you can even sell it in the Office store. So you have a really good idea, you can create that and put it in the Office store and actually sell it and make money out every time someone downloads it and pays whatever it is to install on their site. Now, this can be created by a non-technical person. So here's the part where I mentioned that relational databases are now in the hands of mere mortals. You don't have to have a knowledge of relational data, normality, referential integrity, and all that. Now, I want to really hit the point that an Access Web App is a SharePoint app, which means the same browsers, right? So all the browsers that SharePoint works in, it works in. I can have multiple users at the same time, just like I can with any kind of SharePoint app. So people can log in to the same data as Active Directory permissions. So I have read-only permission, or I have read-write access. Who am I? Why am I logging into Office 365 into SharePoint? That's who I am. That's my identity. There's an app catalog, so I can actually distribute them across my different sites. And you can simply install and uninstall these apps for people. Again, it's centrally controlled by IT. They can go in and turn that on and off, update it, and everyone gets those things. We even inherit themes from the SharePoint site. So if you have pretty colors and background things and so on your SharePoint site, and you add one of these web apps, then it inherits all that. So you get all the same look and feel. And again, it's Office 365, it's cloud-based. So now you've now put your data into cloud where it's backed up and it's accessible. So creating an Nexus Web App, I said it was easy. So let's talk about when creating one. One, I could just use one that someone else created for me, right? I mentioned you could create one and put it in the store. You go download it. There's a lot of free ones in the store. I've created them, put it in the store, so you can just download it and use someone else's, or you can pay for it if it maybe has a lot of value. You can use something called a table template. So you say, I'm going to create my new app, and the table definitions, I'm going to base on a template, of which there's a lot of them out there. We're going to show you how they work. I can import data. I can start from some pile of data. I can bring it in, and that data then will be turned into a relational database. I bring in the data and set up relationships, and the UI is generated for me, and life is good. Or you can start from scratch. You say, I'm just going to define tables. I'm already a DBA person. I already understand relationships. I'm going to go in and do that. Again, we're talking about mere mortals. You don't have to have a lot of skill in that area. So let's go ahead and take a demo. Kevin will show you on creating some of these relational database web apps.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take control here. And hopefully everybody can see that I've got a site content site up in here running. So you can see I've got a couple existing apps, but I'm going to go ahead and create one from scratch. And the way things are going this morning, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. So there, I've got an Access app. I just filtering by name. I could also have searched for it here, but because it's A, it always filters toward the top. So I'm going to go ahead and create this.
So that's a standard template built into SharePoint. He didn't do anything special. He just went into SharePoint and said, I'm going to create a new app.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and create an orders, since we kind of did the north, and let's go ahead and create something similar from scratch. Now what's actually happening in the background here is we're creating the SharePoint app, but we're also going ahead and provisioning a SQL Azure database on the back end. So this is going to take anywhere from 15 to 20 or 30 seconds depending on the queue. And you can see it just finished. So I now have a blank database. So if I go ahead and click on this, it's going to take me to a page that's not going to show me much, but it should say, hey, great, you basically have an empty database. So I can go ahead and add tables to this, and to do that I need to go into the Access client. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and it's going to prompt me, do I want to go ahead and download the little stub file. And what is now happening is the Access client is actually going out and talking to the server. And once I get the connection, now I have a blank database. And as Gary mentioned, you could actually import data, and this is what I did when I brought that Northwind sample database in. So I can import from Access, I can import from Excel, I can import from SQL Server or any other ODBC compliant database. I can also import from text or CSV, and I can import from a SharePoint list. When I was at the SharePoint conference this last, March, one of the things that people always would talk to us at the booth is like, well, does it get me past the 4,000 or 5,000 row limit in a list where performance really starts to bog down? And the answer is yes, it's a SQL database. I've put millions of records in a table and it doesn't matter. I mean, that's the beauty of SQL. It's designed for large amounts of data. So you can easily import your source there. You could also create something from scratch. So if you've ever used the Access in the past, we've got a very similar table designer here. Most of the different field types you're going to want to use are going to be here. We've got different types of text, number, date, currency, yes, no, hyperlink. We do have an image field, calculate, and then a lookup will let you create those relationships between other tables. But for our demo, let's go ahead and create one using what we call the table templates. So to do that, all I can do is go up here and type information in. So let's say I was looking to create maybe a log. I can type log, and it'll show me consumption log, purchase log, and then things maybe semi-related, employee status, or customer history, where there might be a log. You can even type things like clown, and there's not going to find a clown table, but it's smart to say, oh, you know, I think a clown is a performer, so maybe it's a performance or bookings, or maybe it's something for an artist. And what you should see here, hopefully if the screen shows, is some have a table that has a blue header and some have kind of a single table. That signifies that I'm actually going to create multiple tables when I create this database. So let's go ahead. We're going to create an orders. So I'm going to go create an orders, and the first one that pops up is orders, and you can see it's multiple tables. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to build me out the correct relational schema. And it should be just about done. Normally it doesn't take this long.
There you go.
Still thinking. Okay, there we go. So now you can see it's created an orders table, a customer, employees, products, supplies, and categories, which if you remember what the Northwind database looked like, very much the same thing. It also created an order details, but it doesn't make any sense to look at the order details on its own, so it's hidden that table. So I'm going to go ahead and save this just to make sure the whole scheme has been saved. And then let's go back to the browser, and I'm just basically going to do an F5 in the browser. And you can see, there it is. I've got my database, and these will be all blank, of course, but as I select through here, I've got that whole schema. So literally in 60 seconds, without me talking, I could have created a blank app and built my tables through the table templates. With that, I'll hand it back to Gary.
Oops. Great, and I'll grab control. And all right, so apps are easy to create, as you saw. I mean, we talked about 4 different options as far as creating your relational web app, and we showed you really easy things to do. The UI is standard, which is nice. You don't have to go spend a lot of time training people.
Gary, we have a black screen.
Oh.
All we see is your mouse, and your mouse doesn't seem to be moving.
I have a thing that says paused. I think this will do it. How's that?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Thanks for the safety net there. All right, so again, easy to create, standard UI. Again, I don't spend a lot of time training. Once people use a few of these relational database web databases, they're happy. It's secure. Automated design experience. What you didn't really see there is that once you pick the data in the tables, the UI is generated for you. So once I have a table in relationships, all the navigation and the UI is generated for you, and you can even make changes to the tables if you haven't changed the design manually, and it'll update all your UI. So it's really meant, again, for the mere mortals there. And it's based on modern technology. This is not some proprietary special saving thing. It's let's take a look at the architecture when I say standard. So web browser. In the end, you saw our app is running in the browser. So, and it works across multiple browsers, and several people can use it at once. And then there's also the Access client that you saw for creating or editing your web application, which connects up to your server, your service. And so SharePoint on Office 365 is our host on the server, and Access Services is the service running within that subscription that contains the HTML and the JavaScript. And your data lives actually in SQL Azure. It's sort of not obvious to you. You don't really see it. There's nowhere in there where it says now connecting to or no steps you have to do. It's sort of hidden from you, although it is exposed if you know what you're doing. So what I do is I can create the app using the Access Rich Client desktop by connecting to the service. And then when I consume it with a browser. And under the covers, tables and data and queries and so on, all the SQL is happening to SQL Azure in the back end, which gives you the scalability, the full-on relational database functionality of that. And what you may not know is that you could also do this on premises. So if I had a SharePoint on-premise environment, I could configure that to run there myself. I don't have to have Office 365. But if you do have Office 365, this is all done for you, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. So that's why we're sort of excited about talking about it. So you saw that experience, and yes, I can change fields around. I can do some macros. So the macros can do things like, check to see if this is an empty value, and I can build my macros to do different things. Because on the web, I don't have VBA. So unlike Access Desktop Client, where I can have Visual Basic for applications code, I need to write macros inside of the web experience. I also have expressions. I have like today and all those expressions.
Gary, can I just jump in?
Sure.
I think David asked a question, can you run macros and modules? And the answer is yes. I just wanted to kind of clarify. We actually have two distinct kind of macros. There's a UI macro, which is effectively going to generate JavaScript. So we'd use that for navigating between views or filling in a value on a form automatically or something like that. That's something that's a user interface. And then we have data macros, which are actually creating transact SQL. So it'll create a stored procedure, or it'll create a trigger, or whatever you want. And those are obviously running at the SQL level. So we do have some fairly robust functionality. Now the question everybody asks onto that is, can I edit that on my own? And the answer is no. You've got to do it through the Access. It's a very railed kind of experience.
Right, but it gives you quite a bit of power for manipulating the environment, but it's still a bit limited. You have a UI editor. I can drag fields around. I can hide them. I can add new ones and so on. But by new, I mean really recently, there's a new functionality called Apps for Office, which is a technology across Office that lets you essentially put add-ins or plugins into your environment, and they're little iframes inside of your Office application that can talk to your application. So I wanted to mention that as an option for extensibility beyond what comes out of the box. And so I have a very quick little demo here, which I need to switch here. I'm going to switch over to my browser. All right, so do you see that yet, Kevin?
Yes, I was muted.
Okay, this is going a little slow. So what you hear is, again, here's our navigation on the left and views across the top. If I click on this demo view here, it's showing me the data, the same data, but in a different way. So a different page showing that data. And so what you see here is this box that says Bing in it, that is an app for Office. So this app for Office actually contains part of the real estate. Remember, I mentioned it's an iframe, so it can contain real estate on your page. And it's connected to the rest of the page. So right now, notice that there's an address here of Microsoft, and then there's an address in Sammamish, and I can look up the distance. I've read these values into this iframe, and I can, and it says that it's 8.7 miles, and then my distance traveled here hasn't been changed, so I'm going to hit set distance. So what happened is it wrote this value to the record. So this is sort of an intermediate piece that's talking to the outside world. It's talking to Bing. It's saying, hey, Bing, here's an address and another address. And it gives me back a route object, and the route object contains a property of distance, and I'm showing that here. I'm writing that. This is actually a hands-on lab. You can go to MSDN and build this yourself. So we take you through building that. But here's a little more complete version of that. Oh, I don't want to save the item. It might change. So I want to cancel out of that. And here's another version, but it actually shows the route. So not only does it tell me the distance of this particular one, and as I select a different value, so from this address to this address, it's showing me the route for that, and it's showing me the distance. And if I click, set the data, it'll write the data back in there. So this is a way for you to extend and to do external sort of data things. So I could do things like encrypt data. I could write to a Sharepoint list. I could pull data in from Oracle or DB2. I could do all kinds of things because this is just JavaScript and HTML. So that's an extensibility model that, again, is very, very new. It's just been available a couple months. And the store, because these can also be in the store. So there's a Bing map. So you can go take your application that has an address and insert a Bing map from the store. It's free. So your apps now can look really sexy by having components like this added into them. So let's go back to our slides. And we're paused again. All right, I guess it's a safety thing. I had to hit unpause twice. So that was a Miles app, and by the way, that Miles app is available in the store, so you can go download it. Remember, we said people can build them. It's something I created a while ago as a way of learning the product. So it's a nice way to learn is download something we've built and then just pick it apart, open it up in the design view, and look at how everything is created. None of it is very difficult, believe me. So what are we talking about? The advantages of doing this or learning this and getting involved in this space is that I'm moving to the cloud. I know it's a buzzword, but your boss will love it. Say, what's happening? What are you working on? Well, I'm moving our data to the cloud. I'll be very happy. So it's something to have security. So if I had data sitting in an Excel spreadsheet or on someone's Access database on a hard drive or sitting, in whatever format you have, by moving it to the cloud, I suddenly have security. Who can get to it? You can turn people on and off again. I also get access control, read-write, who has read-write, who doesn't. It's SharePoint. If I'm already using SharePoint, here's another way of holding data. And as Kevin mentioned, bypassing the limitations of large number of records. It's real SQL Server under the covers, and you can actually connect to that directly. It's sort of an advanced topic, but if you know enough, you can have end users putting data in through this nice web interface, and then have highly experienced, not mere mortal people actually doing reporting and different things to that data. It's totally exposed. It's really easy. The things we showed you are simple. You can start right now if you have, show what Kevin did, how he went to create a new SharePoint app, pick access, start doing some steps, pick a table, template, install it. You can be going in minutes. You end up with a standard UI that end users will know how to use. And there's other advantages I'm sure you'll think of, but let's talk about a big limitation. You're limited to 1 gigabyte database size. So the database I'm creating is limited to 1 gigabyte. But when you realize that most data in relational databases is just text, it's numbers, it's dates and text, that's a big database. So again, you could have a million or more, a couple million rows into your data to still get by. But you should know it's there because currently there's no workaround. So if you get past a gig, you can't just say, okay, I now want to pay money or something. That doesn't happen at the moment. There's also some limited data types. So if you're used to having an attachment, in the old Access there was an attachment data type. OLE objects, multi-valuable fields, where I can have a field with multi-values. What we do now is we have separate table kind of things. And if you want to really be sexy and do really cool things with the UI, between themes and SharePoint and moving things around, I'm a little bit limited on what I can do. So be aware of those limitations when you're picking out a project, so you don't run into them right away. So the Access team has a blog, and we have videos on that blog, kind of get you started. The kind of fun videos that we created. Look for more webinars. Kevin and I, again, we're frustrated presenters now that we don't have an outlet to show people the stuff we've been working on for years. And we have deep knowledge of this, so it's really good to be able to at least give you a little teaser here about what we're talking about. But we're planning to do more presentations so you can learn a lot more. There's actually a white paper in the works. It was almost done when I got to take my little vacation here, and that is on migrating from legacy Access databases. So if you have Access databases kicking around in your environment, you might want to capture them and move them up to the cloud. And this white paper explains the options, the pros and the cons of each one of the options and how to do that. And it's written by one of the partners, one of the MVPs, so that they know what they're talking about. So that is the end of our slides and our presentation, and we're pretty good on time. We're kind of hoping that you guys will have some questions, although I don't see, actually, you know what? I open up the question window would help, wouldn't it? All right, so if we had some questions, that would be really cool. Again, we're frustrated technologists and no one to talk to about the stuff that we've been working on for years, so it would be really good. But if there are no questions, we're pretty excited about this technology. It's very new. People are just starting to use Office 365, for day-to-day life and lots of different things. And here's one more place where you can basically be a hero at your organization by creating these apps.
So
pretty flexible.
Michael just asked a question. Must it use the cloud? You want to answer that, Gary, or you want me to?
Yeah. Well, I must use the cloud. If you have an on-prem environment, and Kevin, you can yell at me if I get this wrong. If you have an on-prem environment and you limit access to that environment to people who, or to URLs and things within your firewall, I assume that's your question, because the only reason you'd want to not be in the cloud is because you want to have it in your own controlled environment and not let anyone get to anything. So if I have an on-prem environment, I could limit all access to behind the firewall. That's an option. What do you got, Kevin?
Yeah, and that's basically, if you're on-prem, you need the SharePoint 2010 or 2012 server, and then access services. And then David had a question. The 1 gig limit, is that only for data? Does that include the macros and other coding? That actually includes the macros and the other coding. We actually have a separate kind of schema. So all the tables, all the query representations, all the macros are stored in tables, but it has a different schema. And then all the user data is stored in a separate schema. So everything is stored in the database. My experience is that the amount of data that you're going to have for the forms and reports is negligible. Where it really kind of balloons is when you start putting images in there. Because if you start putting in 100K JPEG, that doesn't compress. And then let's see, we have a question about the subscriptions. Yes, you do need to have an Office 365 subscription, and I think there was kind of a follow-on. Is there a free trial? I believe there is.
Yeah, I think especially if you're a developer, you can get a free 30-day site. At least as we used to always do, is that you can sign up. Look at MSDN for because the developer one has a lot of resources, and you can actually download a pre-populated site and play with it. That's a really good question.
And then another question on are the templates available for on-premise? And that's a great question. I believe some of the templates are. You still have to be able to connect to the store. I don't know if there's a way you can download them. The challenge is, if you're an on-prem customer, is that we've made some changes to the service and improvements, and those don't trickle down. So right. You won't see this. So, for example, the stuff that Gary showed with the apps for Office, that hasn't shipped to on-prem yet. The presumption is whenever they ship the next major release, call it SharePoint 2015 or whatever it's going to be, you would get that support.
Right, and you could, if that's okay, if you're in some secure environment where you're not allowed to go outside your firewall, you could, from outside the firewall, connect to the store or create a new app based on a table template, then package it up, bring it into your firewall, and then instantiate it on your behind the firewall site, and then it's cut off from the world, and you just have the design, and you can work it from there. So there's a way to instantiate them outside, package them up, and bring them back inside.
And then we have another question from David. It says, additionally, will it support switchboard and buttons? I'm not sure if switchboards are a specific kind of SharePoint thing. We do have buttons, and you can create your own switchboard. There's actually a UI macro event called Change View, which you could basically turn off all the UI and then create your own navigation model, which there's a template out in the store that's called the Computer Asset Management app, which does that because it looks at who the user is, and it says, okay, you're just a Joe user, you can only see the list of hardware that is assigned to you, whereas if you're a manager or an admin, you see a completely different set of views. So you can create your own switchboards. It's not maybe as elegant as some of the other solutions, but it can be done.
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy, though. Each button just navigates you to where you want it to go. So I wouldn't worry about that. But otherwise, the navigation is all generated for you. Because I know in the past, Access databases, you spent half your code just navigating around. Push a button to go here, push a button to go there. And that's all, as you saw from Kevin's demo, you got drill-throughs and so on to bring you around.
And we've got another question. Do you need to use JavaScript to modify the UI? No, you can't actually modify the UI unless, I suppose, if you had an on-prem.
Right. Well, you can't modify the JavaScript directly. You can only do it through a UI where you move things around.
Yeah, so you don't need to know any JavaScript at all.
Unless, of course, you're running apps for Office. Then you need to know JavaScript.
let's see. Can you please repeat whether the relational database portion of Access Web will work in an on-prem SharePoint 2010 environment? It will not. There was actually a 2010 web database that was in Access Services, and that was based on SharePoint lists. So what you see today is a completely different animal. This one's built on SharePoint and a much more Rail design experience, whereas the Access 2010 web database was a little more free-flowing. You kind of created what you want, and it actually performed fairly well considering you were talking to SharePoint lists. Like, we could easily put 50,000 records in there, but there was a lot of other issues. It wasn't very scalable.
And it's sort of not recommended that you build on that, because they shipped that and said, building on lists is not the right thing to do. Let's do it directly on the SQL. So we didn't talk a lot about 2010.
And then let's see. We get the SharePoint accessibility through 365 environment automatically. I believe so. I'm not sure what the accessibility you're referring to is, but this actually is basically any 365 account that, I think there's like a really low-end account, but if you've got an account that basically has the Exchange services stuff in there, you get the Access services as well. So it's pretty much on most any paid account, you'll get the Access services.
And by accessibility, I wonder if you mean like handicap accessibility. Remember, it's a SharePoint list. It's a SharePoint app, so whatever SharePoint does, probably does a subset of that, actually. We'd have to try it.
And then compared to InfoPath, you want to handle that one, Gary? I'm not.
Yes, as some of you might know, that InfoPath has been absorbed by the Access team. So the developers from InfoPath came to that, and they're working on some future things that we can't talk about. But yeah, InfoPath was a form, right? So I could say, hey, this SharePoint list item, I'm going to essentially view it inside this nice form, and that form's going to have logic and things that I can fill out. And it was really super useful thing. This is a relational database. So in a way, it's similar, because if you think of a SharePoint list item as a record in a relational database, then we have forms that pop up, and you can have logic and you can have autofill and things like that. But we add a relational component to that, so I can pull in data from a zip code database. I can do all kinds of nice things about it. So it's, in a lot of ways, it's similar. So if you have an existing app, that's a SharePoint list and InfoPath. By the way, one of the import options is from a SharePoint list. So you can say, create me a new database based on the SharePoint list, and then go in and it'll generate UI for you, and then you could add some of your logic and so on. Doesn't work offline. There's no offline component at all. They have to be on the network in order to get to it. But it's definitely an option, especially if your lists were getting big and they're getting complicated. But validation, as far as data input, that's all there. You can totally do that kind of thing. So I think migrating some InfoPath forms to Access Web Apps is totally a valid way to go. So your UI is a little less flexible, but other than that, you can do the functionality.
I guess my 2 cents, and I'm not a big InfoPath user, but the thing that is really missing from Access is kind of the built-in workflow. You can create workflow because you've got events, and you can create triggers, and you can do things like that, but it's not really baked in. It'd be kind of
right. Well, the workflow was always part of the SharePoint list behind the InfoPath form. But you're right, we have no workflow, but you can actually connect to a SharePoint list as one of your tables. Now the downside, that's read-only. So I can't really trigger a workflow because I'm only reading that list items in my Access app. But if someone was smart, they might create a app for Office add-in that writes back to that SharePoint list, which then kicks off the workflow. I think that'd be a nice project, and maybe that's something we'll kind of dig into. So it's just a matter of, well, in theory, it's just a matter of time until it's a read-write connection. But for right now, it's read-only, so workflow is a little bit off the table, out of the box. You have to do some. Oops. I guess if you have a project with workflow and Access, that's something that we could definitely do. I know how we could do it. It'd be a bit of work, but right now, not out of the box.
And then I think the last couple questions are, does InfoPath have a future, or will it be replaced with Access? And I would, I'm still under NDA technically.
Well, no,
but
but publicly said at conferences, we've
yes.
seen that essentially what is said is that InfoPath has, 9 more years of support. So if you have them, they're fine. And that Microsoft is going to create something new, not shown, that will replace that functionality. So the idea is there's something new, and hopefully it'll do great things like mobile devices and Internet of Things and all the newest technology kind of things. So that's, it's tough as a developer when you have legacy stuff. And every once in a while you need to kind of say, okay, this is built on technology that doesn't have a future. It's not going to be scalable. It's not going to have issues. So we have to start again and do something new. And they announced that, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that InfoPath is not going to be upgraded, and it's just going to sit there. It's going to keep working and be supported for like 9 more years. So
I think if you go out to the MSN site and look at the recordings of the Sharepoint conference, you can actually see it's like history or future of InfoPath or something like that. There's a recorded session out there.
Right, Channel 9.
Actually give you.
Yeah, MSDN and Channel 9 have all those videos and things, and there's people that have questions. So we have no authority to say, and we don't know that much anyways. So, but I understand your concern, and hey, it could be opportunity, right? So here's a chance to sort of upgrade some of these apps to the latest technology. So I can't really see my questions screen, so I'm assuming
I can. I think that's all the questions.
That's great. Hey, you guys had great questions. You were paying attention, and for us it's early in the morning, maybe not for you, so that was very good. And again, we're planning to do another one of these fairly soon on a slightly different topic, basically building upon what we showed you here in this little teaser. So hopefully you'll come and watch those two that are coming up. So, hey, Kevin, great job, as always.
Thank you.
Nice demos.
I clap.
Thank you, Gary and Kevin, for being here
guess,
this morning. We really appreciate all the new information you've brought to us today. And unless there's any kind of standing questions, we can go ahead and end the webinar for this morning.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you much.
Thank you.